Letter to My Wife by Nazim Hikmet. Oh well, another country. A country which straddles two continents, Asia and Europe. Yes, I'm talking about Turkey. Today, Turkiya. But I still refer to it as Turkey because we have grown up with that name. So when we think about Turkish literature, we go back to a period probably of the 8th century where there are inscriptions. I believe in the 11th century there was a Turkish Arabic dictionary, and most of the literature in Turkey came from the region of Anatolia. Through the Mongol and the Ottoman Empire, there was writing in the Turkish language. One of the most important earliest works was Kitab-ı Dede Korkut, a heroic epic. Then we have the Sufi poetry, we have of course the great Rumi. But when I move to English, I can't but to mention Orhan Pamuk, Oguz Atay and Yasser Kemal. Our writer for the day, of course, is Nazim Hikmet. Nazim Hikmet, 1902 to 1963, is how he is better known. But his original name was Mahmud Nazim Ra. He was a poet, a playwright, a novelist, a screenwriter, a director, a memoirist, and much more. Many people refer to him as the romantic communist or the revolutionary communist. Paternal lineage is traced to the Turkish descent, but on the maternal side he was German, Polish, Georgian, etc. He was repeatedly arrested for his political beliefs, and it is said that he spent most of his adult life either in exile or in prison. He grew up during the political upheavals of the country. He wanted to experiment in his poems and is influenced by the Soviet poets of futurism. He was awarded the International Peace Prize, and interestingly, many of his poems are set to music. Letter to My Wife, written from the Bursa prison. It's indeed a poignant letter from a prisoner who is facing execution. Can you imagine? So let me begin by reading the first verse. My one and only, your last letter says, my head is throbbing, my heart is stunned. You say, if they hang you, if I lose you, I'll die. This is what he has received from his wife. And then he says, you live, my dear. My memory will vanish like black smoke in the wind. Of course you live, red-haired lady of my heart. In the 20th century, grief lasts at most a year. So sad. Here is a prisoner who knows that he's going to be executed. The poem deals with the grim reality of prison life, the inevitability of death which is facing him. And he knows his wife is going to be left behind, but she must continue to live. And therefore, is it ironic? Is it realistic when he says, in the 20th century, grief lasts at most a year? I think that's sad. But probably there's a certain stoicism which makes him say that. And we get the feeling that he's probably talking to his wife. Imagine, he's writing from prison and she, of course, is outside. And then, as he knows the inevitability of death, he probably also knows how he's going to face death. How is death going to come to him? And therefore he says, death, a body swinging from a rope. My heart can't accept such a death. He knows that he's going to be hanged because that's probably the punishment or the way of death for political prisoners in Turkey. And then he says, but you can bet if some poor gypsy's hairy, black, spidery hand slips a noose round my neck, they look in vain for fear in Nazim's blue eyes. Do what you want. Kill me. Hang me. Do you think that is going to make me afraid? Do you think I, who has the ability, the strength, the courage, the power to stand up against you? And remember, these were difficult times for Turkey. A lot of the political upheaval happened during this time. I can't go into the history, but those of you who are interested must read about how there was monarchy and how was the call for democracy by leaders like Atatürk. Anyway, to come back to the poem. You can't find any fear in my eyes, he says. And then he says, in the twilight of my last morning, I will see my friends and you. And I'll go to my grave regretting nothing but an unfinished song. Yes, you'll come to see me probably, to see me hanged or to see my dead body. And what is that I'm feeling bad about? That I couldn't do all that I wanted to do. And he calls it an unfinished song. And then he says, why did I write you? They want to hang me? The trial has hardly begun, and they don't just pluck a man's head like a turnip. There's irony. I know the trial hasn't begun, but even before it has begun, I know what I'm likely to face. I am a political prisoner. And then he says at the end, and don't forget, a prisoner's wife must always think good thoughts. So the poem, though a sad poem, ends on a very, very positive note. His advice to his wife, and that he regrets nothing in life. A poem which is serious in tone. A poem which has streaks of irony. But a figure of speech which is very important is how the poem begins. And you remember, somewhere we have talked about the apostrophe, which is a direct address to a person or a thing, whether present or absent. So this poem begins with a direct address to his wife. He talks to her directly. That's how the poem begins. Otherwise, you would notice that there isn't any great rhyme scheme that he's following. In fact, because it's almost like a conversation to a person who's not there in front of him. There is no regular stanza, but the poem leaves you with a main theme. The theme of a man who is not scared of death. I think that's what comes across beautifully in the poem. I've been to Turkey. I love the beauty of Turkey. I love the cultural contrasts, the cultural amalgamation of East and West. And I chose this poem because I thought we must know something about poetry from different countries of the world. But this poem left to me with a sense of sorrow, of regret. As we live through political upheavals in different parts of the world, what happens to the sufferer? What happens to one who is caught in the crossfire of varying opinions? What happens to that person? And if that person chooses to take a stand and not sit on the fence, what happens to him? I wish more of us had that courage to do what the poet, the prisoner facing execution, has been able to do. Oh, what an idea.